So this is a flight which I designed, just I made it as well. And you see the possibilities to fly here on the northern part of Corsica and flying along here. And you see a satellite photo. I did not fly this day. You see that there are a lot of wave patterns here, but you can see as well that this could be a zone of problem. Here's a little bit drier. Now, these are the things that you do not really know. There are beautiful waves. I have made it several times. You see a lenticularis, you can go high, and then you can try. Here you see as well a little bit wave patterns. Once you find waves here, then you can cross to the lee side, and that is for sure that will give you a possibility to continue then. You see as well in the south of Bosnia-Herzegovina, you see that there are wave patterns as well, but you can see as well that this could be a little bit more tricky to cross here, because once you are coming from here, you have a huge amount of clouds before you can enter in the Föhngaps in the east of the mountains. Another day, a lot of satellite photos studying to see what happens. Here you see humidity, probably it rains, it's dry. Here's a complete dry situation, but you can see as well. So this missing link, what I say, is the Etna. The Etna is here, but this distance from Sardinia to the Etna is quite long. So you have around about 500 kilometers, probably without too much waves. But you see as well, even over the ocean, there is some wave. There are some wave patterns, and I found, for example, here I found quite often in the middle of the seaside, you could find some weak waves, 1 meters. If you're a little bit low, that helps a little bit to come higher to the islands. So this is one of the missing links, what I looked for. I never did it so far. So of course you need much more altitude. If you can climb to 10,000 meters here, probably it's easy, but you see as well, it's quite, here it's raining probably, yeah, but here you see this nice wave patterns even over the seaside, and there you can go to Corfu or to the Greek mountains. And here you see the same thing. So on the western exposed side, you have a lot of humidity. You see just the end of Italy here, and there's still some wave patterns, but this is quite tricky to cross. And probably you can imagine if you have a huge amount of clouds and you cannot see Föhngaps. So I really like my life, and so I would not stop too early with my explorations due to stupidity that I will make. So in the lee, you can see that should be not too much problem. If you can climb to 6,000 meters, you can see the next Föhngap, and you can surf along here to the south, and you see as well that it should be not really a big problem to go to Crete. So I know at the beginning when I made my first flight, there were some people that say, "Wow, you crossed the seaside!" But if you have 6,000 meters and a convenient gliding ratio, it's not really a big problem. So this could be the way from Sicilia eventually to go to this more southern island. Here's Crete, and here as well you see there are wave patterns in the lee of the islands. So the only problem is this is the satellite photo, so these are facts. So we are based on forecasts, and you never really know at 100% what you will find in the reality. By the way, it would be very interesting, and you can take the satellite photo via telephone today. That can be a good big help in order to continue your flights, because if you are arriving here and you see only a huge mass of clouds, then probably you stop here and you could not see that it's just a little bit further a nice Föhngap. So at the 17th of May in 2021, last year, for me it was the day of the century. So I started very early here in my airfield, made some ridge soaring. The departure point was the center of the airfield. And then I went in ridge soaring at first with relatively weak waves to the south and to the south at first. So these are the typical mountains you can make ridge soaring. And then I found a little bit wave. There were quite a lot of humidity in this area. So I made smoothly my altitude, found another one. There were only 1.5 meters, so you had to be patient. Normally you fly with a Lure Mountains, which creates a very nice wave, but there were no clouds and I was not so high. And here was a cloud and it was a wave on the ridge that worked very well. Still quite weak, a little bit more to the east. And then finally in the higher mountains, I found the waves that I expected and which were indicated as well in Skyside. So nice waves. You see the red is the netovarometer. So you have much more lift here, one another lift here. And then I went down to the coastline northwest of Nizza or west of Nizza and Cannes. And there is usually a wave in the north of Fayence or over Fayence, which I could use to prepare the crossing of the Mediterranean Sea. So you see it's a long trip, 180 kilometers, but all with tailwind or at least westerly wind, so a little bit lateral wind. And then, so you do not really expect lifts up, but you can see there are some red spots inside and there it's possible. I found several times, I found waves here, but usually they are not very strong. They are 1 meters. If you are a little bit scared, then sometimes you take some 500 meters and it's good. The wave here is a strange wave because it's in front of the ridge. Here it was really wave, it was not the ridge soaring. By the way, the first time when I made this, I had a huge amount of clouds here and I took out the air brakes because the clouds were going here and I could not cross them. And then I found myself in 900 meters was the cloud base with rain, but we had 100 kilometers of wind and I could see there was a hole to go to Bastia. So I was a little bit scared. I admit it. Even if you have your boat, I have a small raft with me and you have your jackets. But with 100 kilometers in the wind, even in the Mediterranean Sea, you do not really want to go into the water. It was as well quite cold still, the water in the May. Here in the lee side, beautiful wave, strong wave, which is, by the way, all along Corsica. But in this forecast and in this flight, I prefer to go to Italy directly. So this is a little bit the view that you have. You can see here some clouds. This is Corsica, and that must be somewhere above Saint-Tropez. So 180 kilometers in front of me of the water. The first time, yeah, you're looking a little bit. It needs some time until the island is coming closer. So, and this is the little wave that I had, I spoke about in front of the ridge. So the wind 100 kilometers per hour, and here a little wave. And then in the lee, there was a very nice wave, and I think you could climb easily to 9,000 meters, but you are stopped by the authorities, usually in flight level 195. The day was really, really, really excellent for different reasons, because one is it was on the weekend, because in Italy you have a lot of military airspace, which is going up to flight level 250. And so the second reason, due to the pandemic situation in Europe, we had a very small amount of commercial flights, and that helps, of course, to get easier authorization to climb a little bit higher. Here in this case, it was not necessary. You see here, by the way, the island of Elba, which has as well an airfield, so not a real problem to cross to the east. Here you see me in the wave of Bastia, and you see just here is Bastia on the coastline of Corsica. So that was then the crossing, and even here west of the airfield, there was still of the island of Elba, there was still a lift and I could climb here. And in my forecast, I spoke about some holes in these mass of clouds. And this is quite often that you have a little hole here that you can cross easily to the lee side of the Apennine Mountains. And you can see even here before these mountains, you had some waves. There are some military zones, and that day they allowed me to cross without too much problems. You have the Lago Trasimeno that we can see on these photos. You see here this whole, so you have to make confidence on the forecast of well. You can imagine that it would be a little bit more tricky to cross here over the clouds when you have no föhn gaps or you cannot see the föhn gaps. That could be really a problem. But there were a mass of clouds, and in the north there was a mass of clouds. This is the Lago Trasimeno near Perugia, and between it was that day at least was it easy to cross to the eastern side of the mountains. So you see, I found even waves here on the western side, and then smoothly going back, to the east of the mountains. And there are really very nice waves here along these mountains, very nice alignment without too much problem. So you can see in the north. So that is the situation in life. You see there are big rotor clouds, some lenticularis above, and here on the western side, you see the masses of clouds with some rain as well. But here is really the highway to hell. Somewhere was unbelievable, and I was in such a hurry. I had, due to a quite nice northern component, I had really ground speed very often of 300 kilometers per hour, and I saw me in Greece, and I saw in front of me, I saw that will fit, and it was 2 o'clock, and I said, wow, that this time it will be okay. So here you see the ground speed on the screen, so 317 kilometers, and you get really in a kind of run, and so, but this was as well my problem a little bit. So I had sometimes 4 meters per second, and in 5,000 meters, I was authorized to climb up to 6,000 meters, but with 4 meters per second, I continued in this drunken period of speed somewhere. Here you see the Gran Sasso. There was a little bit drier in this area, so you could see even here you could cross eventually, but you have the airspaces of Rome, so that is much more difficult in the north. It's a little bit easier. So the Gran Sasso has beautiful waves as well, and so you can see I continued here. It was beautiful, and somewhere here I made a big mistake. So the different things, these 4 meters per second, and instead of climbing up to 1,000 meters higher, I continued because I saw a kind of cloud which I considered was a rotor, and I say, wow, that must be very great. Here is a big lift, and so on and so on. And I continued, and suddenly I was getting lower and lower, and this barrier of clouds was a thermal clouds. In the lower altitudes, the wind changed a little bit direction to southwest, and then I struggled in this area. No, sorry, I'm too low. This was good. Once again, I'm here. So I had, you see this all red, and I made it with 300 kilometers per hour. Then I crossed this kind of barrier, and there was no lift at all. Then I continued. I had still some lift, but I continued, and finally I found me in this maritime air mass in 1,700 meters, and spent around about 1.5 hours in low altitudes, and I could not get the lift. And finally, I was close to outlanding, and I used the motor which I was happy to have. So that's the wonderful thing with the Stemme. And the motor was relatively hot because I spent 1.5 hours in this altitude. So finally, I was really, really frustrated. But this is one thing a good glider pilot knows to fight against frustration, because you cannot change what happened. And so I took my motor, I took the next wave, and then I said, I was at the moment, I said, okay, I'm flying home, shit happens. But I said, okay, this is an exploring flight. You did never go to Greece, so continue, stop there. It doesn't matter, but you want to explore now, you continue. So that's what I did. I continued more to the south. The waves were there easy. I had enough altitude. So you see a little bit this maritime air, you see these small hills. And I was somewhere here, struggling here, and could not find the wind. But then a little bit later, you see this beautiful range. I remember actually not the name, what it is, and you see everything. The rotors, you see the high lenticularis clouds, and this was 4 meters per second up to flight level 195. Very, very easy. But I made another mistake, or let's say I made an experience, because you make always mistakes, but you learn. So if you're looking here, these were the mountains where I found this beautiful lift, and it was very easy. And you have as well continuity of these mountains more to the east. And if you look what happened then, you saw probably this beautiful big lenticularis just behind. So more in the south, and I was attracted by this lenticularis cloud. I showed you before in a satellite photo. This is very often. But what I found out, here were 4 meters per second, and here I struggled to find really lifts. You see as well, these rotors, they are not so well developed, and they are quite low. So you see the trace that I made here. I continued, and here was somewhere the lenticularis, but I really struggled to find the lifts, spent a lot of time, and probably I lost half an hour of my time. And if you look with a northwestern wind along these hills, I would have probably the same distance to Corsica, to Corfu, and probably faster, and would not have spent 45 minutes to try to find the right altitude to cross here. So I went then, I went then to Corfu, and you should know in Greece you cannot fly from Europe. It's Schengen as well, but you cannot fly from Europe without a flight plan you use anyway. But there you cannot land on an airfield. You need a custom airfield, which is strange. Normally you in Europe, you can fly on every small glider field, but that was not possible. So I discussed with them that I will continue a little bit, and just a little photo here from the crossing. This was a huge crossing, so 300 kilometers nearly, and you see the clouds very far. Here's somewhere Italy, and you see a lot of seaside in front of you. But there I could start from 7,500 meters. They authorized me to flight level 250, and that was quite nice. But anyway, after this long glide, I was in Corfu, still 3,500 meters high. And then I continued. I thought about probably to land in Corfu, but finally, so here's the approach to Corfu. You see some cumulus clouds usually over the islands. And then You see, I went a little bit more to the east because there were nice clouds. And Ioannina, which is an airfield as well, it's a custom airfield, but you have to indicate you, and but nobody was there. So they got a phone call if I can land here, yeah, whatever. And then they said, yo, the next field is Thessaloniki, which is more in the east. Once again, probably a little bit mistake, because here we had northwestern wind. But I looked, there were 380 kilometers to Athena and only 280 to Thessaloniki. But I think I could do it more easy than would have had much more kilometers. But anyway, so I surfed here on the ridge. There was lenticularis clouds as well on the ridge, which is quite funny. And then you see these beautiful wave patterns that I could fly along. In the evening, I made the shadow of my glider on the wave, and then it was quite time to land. So the idea was, of course, at first to fly here and then continue, but that was not the day. But if you think about that, I lost nearly 2.5 hours or more. It was thinkable to achieve this goal. Anyway, Thessaloniki was not so bad. That was my hotel, and there was nobody. I think I was the only guest because it was the pandemic situation, and this was absolutely fantastic. And I said, okay, even with a pure glide, I would have done it, because it's not really a problem to wait in a hotel which is situated like that for 1 week for the guy, because you need more than 2,000 kilometers on the street to reach Thessaloniki by car. So I found this quite amusing when I made a flight in Greece with my friend Alexis, and I went back in the plane. I saw this in the finger from the plane to go out of the plane, exploring by instincts, not by must-dos. Priceless. Okay. So that was the idea. Any questions?
Thank you, Klaus. I've got one question that is more very general. In general, I may have a question about your statistics. Can you just give us a rough overview about the timing and the distances and your averages and stuff? That would be also maybe interesting for people to know.
I'm not really the guy who makes perfect planning like I read in the book from Jochen von Kalkreuth. For me, it's most important that I do it. So because I know some people, they are planning and planning and planning. I say, okay, I will do it, because you can imagine if you have all these obstacles on your flight that you, let's see, that you have all these obstacles on your flight, then it's always difficult to see how fast you will be. So in this part of Italy, where I had more or less an average of 260 to 300 kilometers per hour, I could not say that it will be like that. Sometimes you have lifts, they are 4 or 5 meters per second. Sometimes you have only 1.5 meters. You have to be patient. I think the most important thing when you try to make these flights is always try it. Terry Delore, very, very good wave pilot who flew with Steve Fossett as well. He said one time, if you want to make one record, you need 10 trials. I say it a little bit different. Usually for a project like that, I need 4 years preparation. So it's really, you need to check in this, and you have to try it. You have to try to fly over the gaps, over the clouds. You have to make your decision. You make your flight plan very early in the morning. Sometimes you are discouraged because there are too much clouds. It's too wet. But the only thing that I can say, try it, even if you will not achieve your goal this or that day. That's what happened with this flight. you will learn a lot, and that's what we need. It's not because you have a tailwind, then you can prepare, because the situations are so different. So this day was very weak conditions. There were very weak conditions in my area, and I had to make it in ridge soaring. And sometimes you have 5 meters per second up to 6,000 meters, and it's so easy. As the variation in the forecast or in the real life, they are so big, so it's really not so easy to make a programmation. Of course, I have a rough idea at which time I have to be there or there, but usually I continue. So this is what I can tell for all glider pilots who want to achieve their goal. You have to try it. You have to try it very often, and always comparing with the forecast. And if you cannot fly, you look at the satellite photos at the forecast, or you look, for example, when I'm not able to fly to the Pyrenees for my time schedule, and I see my friend Jill, what he's doing in the Pyrenees, then I have a good information, and for my estimation of the weather. If you see, wow, he's so fast, it's very good. That's great.
Klaus, there was a question from Christian Holler. He asks what the best time of the year is to do this flight. Do you have any kind of patterns?
Yes. Hello, Christian, my friend. There is the best time, and this is a pity, is usually in wintertime in Europe, because you have more of this kind of weather situation. But the problem is the time. So the best time for these huge flights in this case is so midsummer, so May, June. Why? Because you need the full day, because you have the problem, you're going from west to east, and you lose at least 1 hour, even 1 hour 15 minutes, 1.5 hours of daylight flying to the wrong side, and this is all these situations are westerly situations. So you have to go to this, you have to work with this time frame. And in wintertime, sometimes it's better, but in winter times, at the other hand, you have not the possibility to fly in thermals. If ever you fly, you fall out of the wave. In summer times, you have always the possibility to recover with a little bit ridge soaring or thermals. In winter time, so you lose, so you take the motor. But from the day length, you need May, June, probably July. From the situation or the more frequent situation, you have this in winter time.
Then we have another question regarding, it's more general now, and I will then also have a throw 2 technical questions. Greg Watson is asking, Klaus, with all those high wind speeds and wave, do you sometimes wish for a glider with a better performance than the Stemme and in higher speeds regime?
Yeah, so anyway, we know that the Stemme is a very nice glider, a good glider, but it's not the best. So if you're flying with the Nimbus 40M or with the complete new generation of gliders, you can fly much heavier, you can fly faster. It's not so important that you can fly faster, because especially when you make a downwind flight, you see, if you have this 300 kilometers per hour, not average, but ground speed for sometimes for half an hour, that's usually enough. But anyway, it's always easier to have a better glider, but you have to know the advantage of the Stemme is that it's quite a good glider. It's not the best one, but the possibility to fly back, you know, I didn't speak about flying back. I flew 3 days, I flew back. So the next day, after my landing in Thessaloniki, I had to go out of the control zone because the controllers, they were a little bit, I say, rigid. And then I flew with thermals, and then I flew in the maritime area south of Dubrovnik, and I took the motor as well because there were no normal thermals. So that's the domain of the Stemme. For me, the Stemme is really the absolute best explorer and adventurer glider because you have everything in one. So after Dubrovnik, I flew under rain and heavy thunderstorms to the north of Venetia. And so you have such a lot of options and reasonable. It was not dangerous that day, but you would not have done it with a glider. A conventional glider, even if it's much better. So when you are Nimbus 4DM and you have drizzling rain, you are not very happy with your two-stroke engines, even if the Nimbus 4DM, of course, it's much better with this 26-meter wingspan and a gliding ratio about 60.
Klaus, just one more thing. Did you have any airspace issues and controller issues on the way down?
Of course, I forgot to say it because I try most of the time. I try to look when something does not work. I don't try to say see others. But in the situation that I forgot to mention, my mistake was not to take 1,000 meters more with 4 meters per second because I was so in a run that I forgot to do it sometime. But a little bit later, there was another situation that I had from the authorities. They said me, okay, where you are, the military airspace will open in 10 minutes. And that usually I should have asked, would it be possible to stay some 5 minutes more, because
okay, now we seem to have a connection problem now. Here on the server, we may just give it a bit of a time.
that was the error that I made, one of the errors.
Sorry, Klaus, we were just blocked out a bit. The last word, I don't know, 2 minutes ago, we had been just interrupted.
Okay, just what was the next mistake? The big mistake was these 1,000 meters in 4 meters per second that I left behind. It was leaving behind, and the second was there was a military area which was open, my information by the authorities. But I did not try to negotiate to stay probably 10 minutes more in this area. You can always ask. And I did not do, so I continued, and then finally I was too low and I fell out of the wave patterns, and I struggled for even 1.5 hours in low altitudes with small thermals in a bad air mass. So that was a little bit the problem. Did you hear me still? Hello, hello, hello.
Sorry, Klaus, this was my mistake. We have two technical questions, pretty much.
Yes.
Actually, one technical question is regarding oxygen. How much oxygen do you usually take, and with how much fuel do you usually go?
How much fuel?
Yes.
Yeah. So when I make a big wake flight, I make it full because I'm flying alone in this case. And I need my raft, I need my luggage, so I'm flying usually alone. It could be possible to fly with two, but in this situation, when I'm crossing the seaside, I admit there is a certain risk, even if it's reduced. That's the reason why I have my raft, and I do not really want to fly with somebody else and sharing the risk, sharing the pleasure, yes, but not the risk. So I flew with full tanks, so 120 liters, and I came back still with some fuel. I needed only half of the fuel to come back, because the next day after north of Italy, I had a beautiful flight, thermal flight in the Alps to come back to Serre. So it was really only 1 day with probably 4 hours I needed the motor. And concerning the oxygen, so when I'm flying alone, I have always 2 bottles of oxygen, usually 5-liter bottles with 200 bars, which are 1,000 liters of oxygen. And from our experience in Argentina, it holds more or less 15 to 16 hours for one person. So I have the double of the oxygen I need. And usually it's not so important in Europe, because usually you don't fly higher than 6,000 meters, so you have a little bit time if you realize that you are a little bit dizzy and you have a hypoxia problem. But if you're flying higher, it's really very, very important. So from the experience in Argentina, I use always 2 ADS systems parallel, with N, and that works beautiful. So I don't want to change it. So the consumption of the oxygen with 2 EDS systems on a lower range is quite okay, and I verify it often with oximeter.
Then, Klaus, we have just one more technical question. Do you wear parachutes during your flights?
Yeah, I use always a parachute. That's some habits, because when we are flying in the Alps in our area, we have a lot of gliders, and the risk of collision is always there. And so I'm used to use a parachute. For these kind of flights, probably you do not use it, but anyway, a parachute is always a joker. If ever you have a collision, you can have a collision with the plane or whatever, and then you have still a joker to go out and survive.
And another technical question that came up here is, what would change your flights with the S10 or with the S12 whatsoever if the speed polar would be like flatter, like some higher speeds to glide?
You know, I'm not so my friend Jill, I learned a lot with him because he is really observing everything, and the nettobarometer and so on. It's beautiful, and I learned a lot of an engineer who looks much closer. So I'm making not the same analysis that he does, which I find an error probably, but I'm not too much calculating. I'm flying more with the belly than with the brain. Probably sometimes it would be better to use a little bit the brain, then I made less mistakes. But anyway, I think what count is experience. This flight gave me a lot of experiences as well. So, and to analyze your errors and to be honest with you, and not to try to give the error to the Met or to the authorizations or whatever. It's always you who steer your plane, and of course it's clear if you have a very good glider which has a very flat speed polar, it's easier, you are faster. But
okay,
will you do it when you have no motor to come back? That's always the question. So
yeah, well, that's always the option question
yes.
itself. Yeah. Well, we have, and this question came in the very beginning, and maybe is just closing up a bit the talk from you, Klaus. There was the question, with the climate change, do you think wave patterns get different, stronger, weaker? What do you think? What do you believe in this context?
So I'm thinking I've been always a good observer, but I make no statistics, and you know, we have 120 years probably of weather observation. Of course, as a glider pilot who flies a lot like I do, you have as well a certain statistic thing, but I take the weather like it is, and I do not really know if there's a climate change. So I saw it in Argentina. We had some years we had high pressure systems, and we had not too much waves. Some years it was much better. El Niño, La Niña, or I'm not sure. You know, I try to fly when the weather is, and the weather is like it is. I cannot change it, so I tried. I have not a real observation that something of the wave situation has to do with climate change. What I realized a little bit with the thermal situation here in our area in southern France, that we have quite often a situation which was different to 30 years ago. So sometimes we have more inversions, but I'm not sure if it's due to climate change. So I'm not enough expert to say that.
Okay, Klaus. Thank you very much for all this. Those impressions about a very outstanding flight. So we have keep fingers crossed. I mean, you're just pretty much on the start at any time. You have the pretty much the opportunity to do what you can do, and you're just passing the days. So May is coming. So maybe a year later,
the days are getting longer.
The
2
days
weeks
are getting
ago,
longer. Maybe we wish you the day in June, and we wish you always a full tank in the S10. In this case, in name of Stemme and in name of all participants, we say thank you for your time.
It was a pleasure.
And it would be great to have a few updates, as we just got as a little feedback so far from those 3 days. We would like to do those kind of Stemme talks regularly, so just to enroll more of your flights and also other flights. It should be more and more a little adventure platform maybe. So it would be good if we're going to do this maybe once or twice a year, a day or two. And then, it would be great to hear you again. Of course, we hear from you hopefully very often.
Yes, I hope I can announce the success of this project, because I would like to have a new project then.
Oh, and he keeps it secret always. That's good.
Okay.
Fingers crossed. Klaus,
Okay,
thank you
bye
much
bye
for your time, and all the others here on the channel. Thank you very much for being with us the last 3 days. This was the first try in the name of Stemme to do this kind of Stemme talks about the brand, about the gliders, about the passionate glider pilots, about their missions. And we try to get this a little bit more intense. And we're looking forward for the next few years. And I wish you all the best so far, and stay tuned. And we put all the links and records on the homepage, and then also on our platform. And if you have any questions, then throw them on info@stemme.com. In this case, stay tuned, and hopefully next time with us. Cheers and goodbye.
Okay, thank you. Bye bye. It was a pleasure. I finished the Aero in Friedrichshafen.
I hope it was interesting. We haven't been there this year. We spent money to do this.
Thanks. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye bye.